We tend to think of progress as this loud, dramatic thing, but what if one of the most important forces shaping our world is actually quiet? Let's explore why life can sometimes feel like it's quietly breaking down, even when everything on the surface seems to be holding steady.
So, when you hear the word civilization, what comes to mind? Probably the big stuff, right? Technology, governments, economies. But what if the real foundation isn't any of those things? What if it's just the simple repeating rhythm of everyday life? Without that, none of the grand stuff could even get off the ground.
And this is where we see a strange paradox. On the one hand, if you look around, things seem pretty stable. Our systems appear to be working, more or less, but at the exact same time, just under the surface, all these pressures are building up. We're seeing shortages of care workers, our healthcare systems are strained, educators are burning out, and more people feel lonely. Now, we usually treat these as separate problems, but what if they're all connected?
So that brings up a really important question. If these pressures are so real and so widespread, why aren't we talking about them as some kind of systemic collapse? Why isn't it more obvious? Well, to answer that, we first have to look at how we usually think about civilization.
This is pretty much the standard model, right? It's like a stack of building blocks. You start with the planet itself, then you figure out energy. On top of that, you build infrastructure. These days, maybe you add a layer of AI. Then you organize it all with a state, and boom, you've got civilization at the top. It seems clean, logical, but there's something missing from this picture.
It turns out there's an invisible system that's been holding all those other layers together the whole time. It's called the care layer. Think of it as the system that's responsible for the most basic thing of all, the reproduction of life itself.
Now, it's really important to get this straight. When we talk about the care layer, we're not just talking about welfare or social programs. This is something much more fundamental. It's the precondition that makes everything else possible. It's what ensures we have a supply of labor, what maintains social stability, and what actually develops human potential in the first place. Without it, the other layers just don't have a foundation to stand on.
And this is where the pressure really starts to build. We have these two forces moving in opposite directions. The demand for care, for our kids, for the elderly, for each other, it's steadily going up. At the same time, our capacity to provide that care seems to be going down. This gap, it doesn't cause a big loud explosion. Instead, it creates this quiet, invisible pressure that just keeps accumulating across the whole system.
Which brings us back to our question, why don't we see this on the news? Well, it's because of the way this kind of breakdown happens. First, it's gradual. It's not a sudden event, it's more like slow erosion. Second, it's distributed. It isn't happening in one specific place. It's spread out across millions of households. And finally, it's non-terminal. It doesn't bring the whole system to a crashing halt all at once. It just degrades its function, slowly, bit by bit.
So this leaves us with a different way of looking at things. Where does a civilization actually break? Maybe it's not in some big, cinematic collapse. Maybe the real breaking point is much quieter. Maybe it's the moment when everyday life, the very work of that invisible care layer, can no longer be sustained. And that shifts our whole focus, doesn't it? Away from a civilization of growth and toward a civilization of maintenance.